What's up guys, Trevor here with Ecommerce Paradise, back with another video. Today I'm going to talk about what my first store was and why it failed. If it's your first time watching one of my videos, listening to my podcast, definitely go get my free niches list for high ticket dropshipping at ecommerceparadise.com/niches. Alright, let's get into it. My very first store that I ever made was actually a private label brand for skateboard hardware and decks. It was called Beatnik Boards, and beatnikboards.com was the website. I don't think it's around anymore. I lost the domain a long time ago. I let it go. But the website itself was just basically a simple WordPress site. It wasn't anything complex. It was like the most basic. And back then, really what I was trying to do was I was trying to create just a really chill, laid-back brand, kind of with the concept of the Beatnik generation. And I was actually given the idea from a friend of mine, and he said, well, it'd be cool if you called something Beatnik Boards because the alliteration of it, but also Beatnik is like kind of a generation of a kind of counterculture people, that came before the hippie generation. So it was like all about like music and poetry and smoking weed and talking about why war is bad, and art and kind of Renaissance type stuff. And I really thought that vibe was skateboarding, because skateboarders generally are counterculture, and we're usually very peaceful people, and we don't like all the crazy messed up stuff that's going on in the world right now. It is kind of ironic how the skateboard industry has turned towards corporations so much in the last decade, sadly. But it is what it is. That's what happens when people start and run businesses with the mindset of selling them off and becoming rich. And that's what happens when venture capital tries to get into anything where brands exist, because they feel like brands are able to be sold once they're recognizable, and you can sell them in big box stores and stuff like that and scale them up really high because they already have recognition. Brand recognition is a very valuable asset, and there's a lot of venture capital firms that specialize in that kind of thing. And my whole thing with getting into the skateboard industry was just, hey, let me build a brand. Maybe I can make some money with it. Maybe I can build a network and all that stuff around something I love, which is skateboarding, and I love skateboarding. So that was my whole thing. But I learned a lot of weird stuff about the skateboard industry, especially back then in like the early 2010s, that I didn't know before. And there was a lot of animosity with new brands coming up. If you weren't already sort of like kissing the feet of the people that were the heads of the big brands, then they looked down on you, and they don't want you to come up. It's kind of like drug dealers and stuff like that, the same concept. It's like there's only so much market and there's only so much demand, and if you're going to come and just take a piece of the pie, at least give us some of what you're getting, or something like that, right? And so it's very much like mafia style stuff. It's like a smaller industry, so there's a lot of that kind of weird animosity and gatekeeping and clickiness to it. And I didn't really know that going into it, and then I started realizing that because I started doing media and filming people, and then posting it on my brand Instagram account back then. And then I started getting some feedback where, hey, like, you can't post that because I'm writing for this other company and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, that's weird. I never really considered that people would be, would not want to get filmed and posted about online. I always thought like, hey, it's just going to help you. It's called collaboration, But, it's how it was back then. There was just a lot of weird stuff going on in the industry. And I did my best. Back then I didn't have any design skills, so I just used some free, graphic design tools that were available back then, which was very limited. Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator and whatnot. And I came up with, some decent logos and stuff like that, meaningful stuff. I made some custom hardware packs. So basically the first product was just custom hardware, like bolts that were colored and stuff like that. And I got them into skate shops, and they sold, and I got some money through that. But hardware is very cheap, so you have to sell at volume. And I didn't know how to set up an e-commerce site yet at that point, so I was mostly just doing the whole retail thing. So, buying it from the manufacturer, already imported, not direct from China. So it wasn't as cheap as it could have been if I was buying direct from China. So I was losing margin there. and I was having to sell it to the retailer before it got sold to the end consumer. So I was losing margin there as well. And I think that's one of the major reasons why it didn't work out, is because I wasn't selling manufacturer direct. As a private label brand, especially these days where it's really easy to set up an e-commerce site, you can import directly from China to a warehouse, a 3PL or something, and it can be your own brand, and you can get it cheapest cost if you order, a high quantity. Usually they have MOQs, minimum order quantities, but if you order higher than the MOQ, you get better prices. But still, you can order direct from China and then, have them stored somewhere, and then maybe even customize them a bit more, at that point, if you want, or add something else to it, like something with the packaging, or maybe something inside the packaging that makes it more unique to your brand. It makes it more of a premium experience. And then you can sell direct to the customer instead of going through the retailer or even a distributor. And you can keep more of the margin that way. But, retailers and distributors, they bring a lot to the table. They bring distributors, for example, they bring in a built-in network of retailers that they sell to. So if you get your stuff into distribution, they'll get your stuff into a bunch of retail shops. Now, of course, the distributor is going to take a cut, and then they got to take that cut because they're giving margin to the retailer as well. And so you got to set your MSRP, your manufacturer's suggested retail price, at a high enough point to where it's, expensive enough so that there's enough room to make like 20% for each person along the way, because that's what's expected. Minimum is like 20% margin. So if you want to skip distributors, then you want to go to the retailers yourself as a brand and get your stuff just into retail. Number one, retailers are going to want to see brands that are going to drive traffic and people that are coming into the shop demanding their products. So if you already have a lot of demand, if you're doing YouTube and if you're doing a lot of marketing, advertising, whatever, and people are coming to the shop asking for your products, that's great. So retailers are going to want to stock you then, because their shelf space is, it costs them money. They have to pay for that, right? So you have to provide them with a margin that, is more than what that shelf space costs them, and they'll be willing to stock you. The only other way to get around that is doing what's called consignment, and that's what I was doing. So because I didn't have a whole lot of brand recognition yet, people coming in and asking, I said, I'll give you this product. I won't ask you to pay up front for it. You just put it on your shelf, and if it sells, you keep the margin, and you just give me, my margin, and that's it. And so I gave them a decent dealer price and, dealer cost, and they sold it at a certain price, and then, they kept that margin, and they gave me my margin. And so it worked out, and I sold some stuff. It probably could have kept going if I had more money, but then I ran out of money because a lot of the products that I sold, I had given away to friends that I had made as teammates. Like, I'd built like a skateboard team, and I really expanded way too fast. I had like 12 different people on the team within the first year. And it's just like extremely fast expansion can raise your costs so much that, all of a sudden, if you don't have more cash flow coming in to support the business before it starts supporting itself, it's going to collapse. And that's exactly what happened. So my margins weren't there because I wasn't selling direct. I was mostly selling through retailers. And also I wasn't buying direct from the manufacturer. I was buying from someone who was already an importer. So my margins were slim, and I was spending way too much on marketing. And then it just collapsed because I didn't have the money to keep going. And that was fine. Like, I accepted the failure as it was, and I just sort of like slowly drifted away from it. And around that same time, the same partner that had given me the idea to start that brand also talked to me about starting a e-commerce store to drop ship a certain type of bicycle that he saw that was trending, called a fixed gear bike. Around 2010, 2011, 2012, he started noticing there's a lot of kids riding around these fixies, they call them, really colorful, very simple fixed gear bicycles around North Hollywood in LA. And I looked at the market, and yeah, sure enough, it was trending, and a lot of new brands were popping up and stuff. And so we made a decision to go to a manufacturer in Los Angeles and ask them if they could do drop shipping for us. And I forget how we found the manufacturer. I think it was just through a simple Google search or something like that. But we found a manufacturer that allowed drop shipping for retailers, or if you were online only, or like a mobile bike shop. A lot of these mobile bike shops exist out there. They'll do drop shipping for you if you purchase like 10 units up front. But they didn't just sell fixies, they sold all sorts of bikes. Everything from like big chopper cruiser bikes and road bikes to like really small little kids bikes and toys. And they were cool with us just buying 10 of these little kids bikes and toys that were like, I don't know, forget, like $10 or $20 each. So he only had to invest $100 or something up front. And he got the bikes and he gave them away to a charity, and we got a dropshipping account. And so I went and sat down and built a website to sell the products. And I didn't know how to build any e-commerce sites, so I just looked up what's a free e-commerce site. And back then it was a thing called eCreator, and I think it's still around, ecreator.com. But I built out a simple store, and it's kind of like Shopify. It's like super simple and easy to use, and it's sort of like Shopify and eBay if they had a baby. That's eCreator. And they run Google Shopping ads for your products, and they charge a fee if you sell, just like eBay does, but it's lower. It's like 3% or something instead of 9%. And then you have to pay the payment processing fees, and you're good. So I built out the store and listed the Fixie bikes for sale. And I remember when we got our first sale, and I checked with the supplier, and it's in stock. And the profit margin, I think we made like $50 or something after shipping. And it shipped out to New York, and the lady got it and assembled it, and she was super happy. And boom, I was like, wow, that worked. That was amazing. So my first store failed, but that doesn't mean that I was a failure. That meant that the business model and the way I was going about it just wasn't going to work. And I needed to find something else, something different that made sense, okay? And I also took a step back and I looked at my strengths and my weaknesses, which is something I learned in college. When you go in college, you take a marketing class, they tell you how to make a SWOT report, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So you look at your strengths, you look at your weaknesses, and you look at opportunities in the marketplace, and you look at threats, competitors mostly. And so my strengths were marketing, sales. Those are my strengths. My weaknesses was brand development, graphic design, maybe like, networking a little bit. I had strengths in networking as well as I had some weaknesses as well. And I think one of my weaknesses was just being involved in skateboarding, the actual sport of it, maybe made me too tied emotionally to it to really do business in it. Like, I don't know if you guys notice this, but like a lot of the owners of skateboard companies aren't really major skateboarders themselves. Like maybe they skate a little bit, but they don't really skate that much. A lot of them are just like not even known at all. I mean, it's very like it depends. Like Tony Hawk is one of the biggest well-known skaters, and he owns his own company, right? But there's a lot of skateboard companies that are owned by people that don't even skate at all, and that's because they're just really good at business, really good at branding, and really good at that whole business model, right? And yeah, like one of the best examples I think is the newest owner of Lakai Shoes, the guys who bought it out when Lakai almost went under, when they went bankrupt. That new owner, he doesn't even skate at all, nothing to do with skateboarding. And he's luckily partnered with a guy who's a major skateboarder and influencer as well, who's now looking at buying him out. But that's just one of the best examples of like venture capital jumping into something that just has something to do with branding, but it has nothing to do with the sport. So they have no emotional ties to it, nothing that makes them feel like there's barriers that aren't really there, and I think that's kind of part of the reason why I never really pursued another skateboard company brand thing after that, is because there's just a lot of emotional ties that I have to skateboarding, because I grew up kind of idolizing professional skateboarders, and that, really messes your brain up when you go out to do networking and you meet somebody you've idolized in the past, and the whole, like, when you worship something, it's like, whoa, is it real? Like, there's that weird feeling, and they sense that, and they're turned off by that, right? So that really didn't help me. And so that's a weakness, or you could look at it as a threat too. But whatever that was, that also is another reason why I just didn't, go after that. And I've always been riding bicycles. So one of my strengths in the bicycle industry is that I love bicycles and I know bicycles. And, I know how they work. I know how to ride one. I know where to ride. I know everything a bicycle owner loves about them, and the pain points and the solutions, all that stuff. So it's a perfect industry for me to be in because I understand them completely. Now, as far as weaknesses goes, it's not a whole lot. Like, I love the industry and the people are very friendly, and I didn't grow up idolizing like professional cyclists or anything like that. I didn't really care. So to me, I go and I see a professional cyclist, I'm like, oh cool, it's just another person, and then they actually like that, because then there's no like weird feelings, like, oh my God, you're amazing, like bow down, like that. And people, they're like, hey, I'm just human. I just happen to be really good at this certain thing. You don't have to idolize me, let's just be friends. Like, we can be on the same level. And I totally understand, because like I'm really good at e-commerce and I make all these videos, and then sometimes I get people coming up to me like, oh man, like I saw your video, it's amazing. I'm like, okay, like, cool, thank you, bro. Like, I try to be nice, but it's like kind of weird, it's like, hey, like, you don't have to fan out on people. Instead, you could just be like respectful and thank them, and that's all. Move on. They're just another human being, and just like kind of appreciate, but you don't have to like worship, Anyway, so doing a SWOT analysis on myself helped me understand why I wasn't successful with that first store, and why somebody else might be successful with the skateboard brand. But why my second store was very successful is because I was the perfect person and it was within my strengths. Like my strengths are retail, marketing, sales. I keep that margin. I didn't have to deal with the inventory or the product development or the shipping or any of that stuff. I understood how retail works and understood how sales works, and it worked out perfectly. Even that second store, it didn't end up being super successful. I mean, it was like kind of successful, but we ended up evolving into our own Ecommerce site after that, and focusing on the road bike niche. And then we evolved after that, and we focused on the electric bike niche. And then we evolved after that and focused on mobility scooters, and and then I evolved after that, and I went into like home appliances and all this other stuff. So I've done like a ton of different sales in different industries now, and I like to help clients because I can help them understand their own industry, whatever industry that they want to be in. I can help them be successful with their first site, as opposed to them just stumbling into something, not realizing it's not right for them, failing at it, or just not having as much success as they wish, and then thinking, oh, I'm a failure, or the business model doesn't work. Whereas it's not true. It's just maybe it wasn't the right niche for you, or whatever. You have to just try to think about it outside of yourself and within yourself in the right ways, so that you understand that it's not because of you, but it kind of is. But it's less like the niche is wrong. It's more just like the niche link, the combination is wrong. You and the niche. Okay, so you got to choose the right niche for you. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, so that's kind of the story of my first site and why it was a failure. And I hope that makes sense. And yeah, that's why I do drop shipping, and I enjoy it because it's location independent. I don't have to manage a bunch of products and SKUs. I also do services, agency work for high ticket dropshipping store owners and other e-commerce store owners as well. We do done for you stores. We do scaling services like supplier recruiting, product uploading, SEO, ads, all sorts of stuff, virtual assistant training, list goes on and on. You can go to ecommerceparadise.com to see all of that stuff. Our free niches, I also have a free book for high ticket dropshipping, ecommerceparadise.com/book. And I also have a free mini course. Just go to ecommerceparadise.com/resources, or click the link at the top of the website, and you'll see all that stuff up there. It's all listed in there. And so if you want any help, definitely feel free to join my course and community on Patreon, patreon.com/ecommerceparadise, and I have all my courses up there, as well as all my templates and sheets and whatnot that we use. We make it available for a low monthly price, as well as Discord access. So you can have access to ask me anything, anytime through there. And I'm happy to help you as well through email, trevor@ecommerceparadise.com. So just let me know if you have any questions, comment below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.